Good morning and welcome to this morning's shadow hearing entitled Kidnapped and Disappeared, Trump's Assault Destroys U.S. Families and Communities. This is our third shadow hearing in a series of hearings that I've been holding on how the Trump administration is destroying our immigration system and trampling our constitutional rights by kidnapping and disappearing people of all immigration statuses, including U.S. citizens. Today, you will hear a few of these stories and learn how this impacts all of us, our economy, and who we are as a nation. A few housekeeping items before we begin. While today's shadow hearing is not a formal hearing, I plan to operate it as if it were, with opening statements from our witnesses and 5 minutes of questions from each of our members. We have a timer right here to help folks keep track of the time, and we'll do our best to alert you when your time is up. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. I would like to welcome all of our witnesses today, as well as the members of the Judiciary Committee and members from the wider Democratic caucus, to today's shadow hearing on how the Trump administration is destroying U.S. families and communities. I think it's important to start with this undeniable fact. Donald Trump lied to the American people. He lied when he said that he would bring grocery prices down. He lied when he said he would release the Epstein files. And he sure as hell lied when it came to immigration enforcement. President Trump said that he would focus on deporting the worst of the worst, that his administration is focused on serious national security threats. But we know that that is not the case, and that the American people see right through this deception and lies. According to a CBS poll, a majority of Americans believe that the Trump administration is not prioritizing the removal of dangerous criminals and public safety threats, and nearly 60% disapprove of how the Trump administration is using detention facilities. ICE's own data revealed that roughly 65% of people in immigration detention have no criminal convictions. Instead, they're targeting everyone that they think they might be able to deport, including veterans, farm workers, green card holders, students, and U.S. citizens. Tom Homan, the president's so-called border czar, said that arresting non-criminals is, quote, our job. And Stephen Miller's quota for 3,000 arrests a day is driving ICE to indiscriminately arrest people at any cost. In Los Angeles, ICE has been racially profiling people, kidnapping and disappearing people, causing fear and terror in people who simply look Latino, speak Spanish, speak English with an accent, or happen to congregate on certain corners. In Chicago, we've seen President Trump use imagery of going to war with an American city over its immigration policies. In D.C., Los Angeles, and now in Memphis, we have seen the Trump administration call in the National Guard to aid and act as support for immigration enforcement. These actions set an extremely dangerous precedent and are a huge waste of resources. And around the country, we have seen out-of-control ICE agents and other law enforcement agencies terrorize communities through over-the-top enforcement actions. Oftentimes, these agents are masked in unmarked vehicles, refusing to identify themselves, bashing in car windows, and conducting what looks like a kidnapping. This indiscriminate immigration enforcement has led to an increased number of family separations. According to a report earlier this year, more than 400 children have been sent to the Office of Refugee Resettlement Shelters from the interior of the United States. In some cases, parents are being told that their children will be taken away unless they give up their right to a hearing and to their country of birth. In other cases, children who arrived as unaccompanied minors are being sent back to government shelters for months after they had already been released to vetted sponsors. The Trump administration has done everything it can to demonize immigrants, trying to paint them all as criminals. And it is having a terrible effect on our families, on our communities, on our economies, on our country. Fortunately, the American people have not fallen for this Republican propaganda. In fact, public sentiment approving immigrants and immigration is back to one of the highest percentages we've seen in recent times. They have not turned their back on immigrants and immigration. We have seen over and over again that people do support immigration. This summer, a Gallup poll noted a record high 79% of U.S. adults who say immigration is a good thing for our country. A Pew poll showed 60% of Americans disapprove of President Trump's suspension of most asylum applications, which was ruled unlawful in a federal court. Of course, the Republican majority has not held any hearings on this topic. And so, as the top Democrat on the Immigration Subcommittee, I intend to hold my own shadow hearings. And that's why we started this series, and we are so grateful to all of you for being here to help hold the administration accountable for its lawless actions. Very grateful to all of you, to the witnesses, for coming forward today to shine a light on this latest disgusting tactic from an administration that knows no shame, and to all of my colleagues who are here for their work, for their attention, for their commitment to lifting up this issue and demanding accountability. I look forward to our discussion. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's witnesses. Chelsea White was born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee. It's also where she met Hilario Martinez Garcia, her husband of 16 years, and where she proudly raised her 3 children, with a 4th on its way. Before her husband was deported, Ms. White owned a home cleaning company, Nashville Maids, which she has run since 2015. Since 2023, she has also been a franchise owner for a commercial cleaning business. Ms. White is currently in her 2nd year at Nashville State Community College, studying to become a registered nurse. After nursing school, Ms. White's goal is to work in women's health or labor and delivery. Mimi Letnich is a nationally recognized advertising strategist and the founder and chief creative director of the creative agency 24/7, where she leads teams in delivering bold strategies and experiential campaigns for some of the world's most iconic brands, including AT&T, Nike, Apple, and the NFL. She and her husband are currently caring for 4 young U.S. citizen children whose mother, father, and grandmother are all in immigration detention facing deportation proceedings. Ms. Letnich lives in Oregon. Naina Gupta is policy director at the American Immigration Council, where she leads the council's policy advocacy portfolio. Prior to her 5 years in Washington, D.C., Ms. Gupta represented immigrants facing detention and deportation as a civil rights litigator. Ms. Gupta's expertise focuses on immigration enforcement, detention, and the intersection of the immigration and criminal legal systems. Ms. Gupta started her career as a federal law clerk to the Honorable Myron H. Thompson. She is an adjunct immigration law professor at Howard Law School and a graduate of Stanford Law School and Northwestern University. She's also a proud immigrant. Janessa Goldbeck is a Marine Corps veteran and the CEO of Vet Voice Foundation, a national nonprofit that mobilizes veterans and military families to shape American democracy and defend the values they swore to protect. As a Marine Corps combat engineer officer, she led missions overseas and served as a uniformed victim advocate, supporting fellow service members through some of their toughest moments. While on active duty, in addition to her assigned duties, Mrs. Goldbeck worked to reform the military's broken sexual assault reporting process. She holds a BA from Northwestern University and a master's in public leadership from the University of San Francisco. And last but not least, Robert G. Lynch is a professor of economics at Washington College, where he has taught since the fall of 1998. From 1983 to 1998, he taught at the State University of New York at Cortland, where he served as chair of the Department of Economics between 1991 and 1993. Dr. Lynch has served as a consultant to numerous organizations, including private businesses, governments, labor unions, and research organizations. His areas of specialization include international economics, public policy, public finance, economic development, and comparative economics. Dr. Lynch holds master's and doctoral degrees in economics from the State University of New York at Stony Brook and a bachelor's degree in international and development economics from Georgetown University. We welcome all of our distinguished witnesses, and we ask that you summarize your testimony in 4 minutes to help you stay within the time. There is a timer here, and I will try to give you a little sign with the gavel as well, because I know it's a little hard to see that. And so let us now start with Ms. White. Welcome.
Thank you, Ranking Member Jayapal and members of Congress. My name is Chelsea White, and I'm here to share my family story. I met my husband, Hilario Martinez Garcia, in 2009, and we've been inseparable ever since. We married in 2013 and have 3 children, Ariana, who is 11, Alonzo, 10, and Felix, 6. Hilario is a devoted husband and father and worked tirelessly to support our family. He pushed me to pursue my goals and dreams, starting my business, earning my GED, and enrolling in nursing school. For 25 years, Tennessee was his home, where he built a life and contributed to his community. On May 9th, 2025, we were returning from a cleaning job when we were stopped at a DUI checkpoint. I was driving and was cleared, but a second officer singled Hilario out and told us to pull into a parking lot. We were quickly surrounded by officers. They pulled us out of the car, separated us, and 5 minutes later, they returned and told me that ICE agents were taking Hilario. I was ordered to leave without even a chance to speak to him. Driving home alone, 4 months pregnant and in shock, was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I kept thinking, how am I going to explain this to our kids? Hilario had never spent a single night away from us. How do you prepare yourself to do it all alone? The week that followed was even worse. I called over a dozen ICE numbers and searched every website, but no one could tell me where Hilario was. I was given evasive answers and non-functional numbers. I didn't know if he was okay or if he had his medication. Eventually, I connected with Mike from Tennessee Immigrant and Refugees Rights Coalition, who found Hilario in Knoxville. Hilario was given a 5-minute phone call, and the first thing he asked was if me and the kids were okay. All he knew was that he was being sent to Louisiana. In detention in Louisiana, Hilario's condition worsened. He and others were told they had no rights because they were illegal. For the next month, every day was a struggle. Hilario was suddenly very sick with high blood pressure, and I was so worried about him and our future of our children as we couldn't even pay rent. I then spent our anniversary and my birthday alone. When we finally got a hearing, the judge refused to release him despite our marriage and our family and his good character. She said he was a danger because a report claimed he had a 2020 conviction from an unknown jurisdiction, but that was completely false. Although our lawyer had proof to deny the allegation, Hilario, feeling hopeless and pressured, was convinced to sign his own deportation papers. On June 9th, he was deported to Mexico. After his deportation, I made the decision to join him to keep our family together. I sold everything that I could. We lost everything that we worked so hard to build. Our home, my business, our car. Now we're trying to rebuild our lives in an unfamiliar country. Our 2 children with learning disabilities are especially struggling with the new language, and they're feeling isolated and confused. I'm here today because families like mine deserve better. We deserve policies that recognize that human cost of deportation. Our children, especially those with disabilities, deserve the chance to thrive, and families belong together without being forced to choose between love and survival. Thank you for listening. I hope my story reminds you that behind every policy are real people, real children, and real futures at stake.
Thank you so much for your powerful testimony, Ms. White. Ms. Sletnich.
Members
Ms.
of the
Sletnich, if you just pull that a little bit closer to you. Just tilt it down a little bit. There you go.
My name is Mimi Letnich. I'm an entrepreneur, a wife, and a mother of 2 sons. Today I'm here to talk about another mother, my dear friend Jackie, and how the Trump administration devastated her family and traumatized her darling American children, 9-year-old triplets, Carlos, David, and Abby, and their 7-year-old little brother, Jeffrey. On June 28th, at Peace Arch Park, Jackie, her mother, and children were having a picnic with her sister's family, legal residents of Canada. As they said goodbye, agents moved in and arrested them. Her sister's family was released. Her 71-year-old mother was sent to an ICE jail. Jackie and her children were disappeared. I heard they were missing on July 2nd. Having visited with Jackie just days before about my father's passing, I was shocked. We immediately started reaching out to our network. Within a day, we had secured an attorney, connected with Congresswoman Dexter, and started navigating the chaotic immigration system. It became painfully clear that without our tenacity and connections, Jackie and her children would have vanished without a trace. We found them 12 days after they were arrested in a CBP facility never intended for detention. The conditions were terrible. Jackie was detained. It was denied access to anyone, including representation. Even the Congresswoman was only allowed to look at the kids and her through glass, like zoo animals. CBP lied outright to the Congresswoman about multiple things. CBP expedited passports to send the children out of the United States, their birth country. But worse was the state-sponsored abuse the children endured. They were threatened constantly with foster care, separated even from each other. Agents interrogated the children without Jackie. They were asked, where did they live? Did they have any money? Did they have relatives? Did they have a father? Shortly thereafter, ICE took their dad. The children believed that was their fault. Only after a monumental collaboration and race against time, a TRO was granted right before Jackie and the kids were to board a flight. Later that day, CBP called me, asked me to come collect the kids from the airport. I was elated to see the children, yet anxious about logistics, what they had been through, how to protect them. And then I thought about my friend, her pain. We got in the car and the kids shared a secret. They handed me this coloring book where Jackie had written me a note in the inside cover. Mimi, thank you for everything. Hopefully this will be over soon. I will miss my babies. Please take care of them. This is so hard. Be careful with Jeffrey, Abby, David, and Carlos in the swimming pool. I talked to them that they need to obey you and Chris. I miss them already. Everything works for good. We are on God's hand. I have been praying so much about this. Love you all with all my heart. And then a side note. Abby has an appointment on July 31st at the orthodontist. Please call them. I haven't been able to use my phone since they retained us. Love, Jackie. I leave you with a request from these 4 children. Please help Mom and Dad get home. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Letnich. Ms. Gupta.
Good morning, Ranking Member Jayapal and distinguished members. My name is Naina Gupta, and I currently serve as Policy Director at the American Immigration Council. Recently, the Council released a report titled Mass Deportation, Analyzing the Trump Administration's Attack on Immigrants, Democracy, and America. While nannies disappear from local parks and masked agents drag immigrant fathers from cars, this administration continues to use safety as a pretext for mass deportation. But it is mass deportation itself that makes all Americans less safe. From day one, the administration has diverted resources away from multiple federal law enforcement agencies, redirecting them to low-level immigration arrests. 20% of FBI, 25% of DEA, 80% of the ATF, and nearly all of Homeland Security investigations, which is charged with investigating child, human, and drug trafficking. This means far less focus on real public safety priorities, making American communities vulnerable to political violence, organized crime, and domestic terrorism. Instead of focusing our country's limited enforcement resources on specific groups of non-citizens, like we've had prior administrations of both political parties do, from day one, Trump has rejected the use of enforcement priorities. And when no one is a priority, everyone is a priority. Longtime residents, undocumented families and workers, migrant children, asylum seekers, and racially profiled U.S. citizens. Trump won the election with a dehumanizing promise to deport criminal immigrants and the worst of the worst. But nearly 60% of ICE arrests so far are of people with no criminal conviction. Only 1 in 10 in our rapidly expanding detention system are people with violent criminal offenses. Thousands are locked up despite posing no public safety threat at all. There aren't even enough immigrants with criminal records to hit the White House's deportation goals. The administration is also targeting people with legal protections, stripping temporary protected status now from over 1 million people, and despite majority American support for the program, recently detaining dozens of DACA recipients. This indiscriminate agenda has pushed the agencies to use high-profile crackdowns in large cities and other tactics that maximize arrests. When the White House set its quota of 3,000 immigration arrests per day, masked officers began arresting immigrants dutifully attending court hearings, including entire families in lobbies and elevators. Immigration judges facing pressure from political appointees dismissed cases so ICE could expedite removal orders without judicial review. And this month, we've watched DHS scale up worksite raids, arresting nearly 500 workers in a Hyundai plant in Georgia, making it the largest single-site worksite raid in DHS's history. At the local level, new agreements with local police departments that effectively turn local police into ICE agents have grown by 600%. But when local police are a force multiplier for ICE, they have less time to focus on real public safety issues, and people become more afraid to report crime. Like in Tennessee, where according to a police chief's post, an infant died because their non-citizen caretaker was too scared to call 911, given the recent Nashville raids conducted by state police and federal agents. What's left is a chilling message. No immigrant is safe, no matter our background, status, or contribution, and mass deportation comes at any cost, including American safety. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gupta. Ms. Goldbeck.
Morning, Ranking Member Jayapal, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Janessa Goldbeck. I served for 7 years as a Marine Corps officer, where I had the privilege of leading Marines and sailors from every background. What united us was not where we came from, but that we swore the same oath and carried the same mission to protect the American people and defend the Constitution. Today, I carry that experience into my role as CEO of Vet Voice Foundation, a national nonprofit that mobilizes veterans and military families to defend our democracy and constitutional freedoms. I'm here with a simple message. Turning the National Guard and active duty military into an immigration police force dishonors their oath and corrupts their mission. The Guard exists to protect Americans in times of crisis, flood, fires, and war, not to police families on our streets. Misusing them this way erodes readiness, wastes taxpayer dollars, and endangers the freedom every service member swore to defend. For more than 2 centuries, America has kept a firm, bright line between the military and civilian law enforcement. That line protects our freedom. Soldiers are trained to fight wars, not to run domestic immigration centers. Americans serving in the National Guard serve part-time out of a commitment to their communities. They are our neighbors, our coworkers, and classmates. They join to respond to disasters at home and to defend their country in war, not to serve as immigration police. They are disproportionately middle and working class. Many are people of color. Many are first or second generation immigrants. They wear the uniform on weekends and return to jobs in their communities, in firefighting, in healthcare, in construction, and teaching. Forcing them into the role of immigration enforcers tears them from their families, pits them against their own communities, costs us millions, and weakens readiness for real emergencies. This summer, heavily armed National Guard members deployed on the president's order against the wishes of local law enforcement and elected leaders in Los Angeles with rifles, tactical gears, horses, and armored vehicles. The mayor compared it to the way a city looks before a coup. One Los Angeles Marine Corps veteran reported that his wife, a lawful immigrant, was afraid to take their kids to school after troops appeared at roadside checkpoints. Guard members themselves said they felt like props in the president's political show, not defenders of our nation. Instead of safety, these missions brought about fear and confusion. Here in Washington, D.C., Guard members have been deployed under the so-called crime emergency, costing taxpayers at least $1 million a day. Most are not fighting crime. They are cleaning parks, picking up litter, and doing jobs meant for city workers. That is wasted money, wasted manpower, and wasted trust. It does not make us feel safer. It makes our streets look like North Korea, not the United States of America. Meanwhile, families tied to the military are being torn apart by ICE raids. In New Orleans, Paula Cluat, the wife of a Marine veteran, was detained by ICE during a green card appointment. She was still breastfeeding their infant daughter. She spent nearly 2 months in custody, separated from her husband and her baby, before being released with an ankle monitor. That is not just cruel, it is a betrayal of a family that has already sacrificed for this country. Or consider Army veteran George Reytes, a U.S. citizen swept up in an immigration raid in California. He identified himself as a citizen, but ICE agents still pepper sprayed him, broke his car window, and detained him for 3 days. His warning afterward was simple: if this can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. These are not isolated mistakes. They are part of a pattern of overreach that turns our military and law enforcement into tools of domestic fear and control. When I raised my right hand as a Marine officer, I swore an oath to the Constitution, not to the President, not to a party. Every service member takes that oath. It is a promise to the American people that the military will defend our freedom, not be turned against us. Demonizing our neighbors is fundamentally un-American. This country was built by people of every color, every faith, and every nation of origin. To turn soldiers against the very communities they come from is to deny that truth. When we treat immigrants as enemies instead of neighbors, when we tear apart the very families who serve in our ranks, we are not defending America, we are betraying it. That is why we must hold the line. The military is not a weapon of politics. The Guard is not a police force. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Very powerful. Thank you. Mr. Lynch.
Good morning. Thank you, Ranking Member Jayapal and other distinguished members, for inviting me to this important hearing. For the past 15 years, I've been studying the effects of both immigration and deportation on the U.S. economy. Last year, my co-author Michael Ettlinger and I wrote 2 reviews of economic studies that specifically measured the economic effects of past deportations. This year, as a follow-up to those 2 papers, we wrote another paper with Emma Cifre that reports some of the early signs of the economic consequences of the deportations that are occurring right now. Let me briefly summarize our findings, turning first to the economic effects of past deportations. 4 of these deportation episodes have been carefully studied by economists. In each of these episodes, the proponents of the deportations asserted that the policy would raise wages for American workers, grow the economy, and create jobs for American workers. Almost every time you heard the same phrase, because immigrants, quote unquote, are stealing our jobs. But in each case, the opposite happened. Jobs for American workers did not materialize. Their wages did not go up, and the economy did not grow. Take the most recent example in the Secure Communities program that ran nationwide from 2008 to 2014 and led to the deportation of 454,000 undocumented immigrants. Studies found that the deportations slowed economic growth, reduced hourly wages, and led to the loss of almost 520,000 American jobs, American workers. The bottom line is that research has shown that past deportations have been bad not only for unauthorized immigrants, but for authorized immigrants and U.S.-born workers and the economy as a whole. And these findings caution us that the current deportation program may very well do the same. The third study we released last month in August looked at whether we are starting to see signs in the hard data of the harmful economic effects from deportations. As all of you know, the news is full of stories of shortages of workers, causing crops to go unharvested, restaurants to close, nursing homes to raise their price, child care centers shutting down, construction projects stalling, manufacturing employment shrinking. And all this is happening even though the deportations are still far short of the president's ambitions. So the question we asked ourselves is, are the data starting to reflect what businesses and consumers are experiencing? And here are a few highlights of what we found. In the construction industry, during the first half of 2025, the 10 states with the highest concentrations of unauthorized immigrants in their construction workforce saw construction employment actually decline. To make matters worse, residential building permits, which are a predictor of future construction and construction activity and jobs, were down significantly, 7 to 8% in the 3 regions of the country with the highest share of unauthorized workers. In the agricultural industry, which is heavily dependent on unauthorized labor, it lost 155,000 workers, that's 6.5% of its workforce, in just the 4 months from March to July of this year. Production shortages from this loss of workers may already be showing up in prices at stores. For example, from April to July, the price of fresh vegetables went up at an annual rate of 8.2%. And the latest August numbers in the CPI suggest that it's going up even faster. Employment growth, likewise, in leisure and hospitality is down, particularly in the restaurant industry. And restaurant prices are starting to rise. And finally, the U.S. labor force lost 1.2 million foreign-born workers from January to July of this year. This is a predictable outcome of the recent immigration policies and consistent with the losses in industries I just described and consistent with the weak job creation numbers and slow economic growth that we saw in our recent national reports. The bottom line is that we are starting to see in the data the harmful economic effects of deportations. If they continue apace or further accelerate, we can expect that the data will increasingly reflect injury. And none of this is a surprise to anyone who has looked at the data, who has studied past deportations. Unauthorized immigrants play critical roles in the economy. They do work that U.S.-born workers aren't clamoring to do, whether it's picking fruits and vegetables, working in slaughterhouses, taking care of the elderly and children, working in manufacturing, and or in cleaning homes and businesses. They fill in many industries, they provide they have skill niches that are very important to those industries, such as roofers and framers in construction. And these are some of the reasons why businesses hire unauthorized immigrants. And when they can't do so, many businesses struggle, cut back on production, and lay off U.S.-born workers. So it is essential that we address immigration sensibly. And if we do not want to damage not just unauthorized immigrants, but all residents of the United States, citizens or non-citizens alike. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to all of you. Very, very powerful testimony. We're now going to recognize members to ask questions under the 5-minute rule. I'm going to start with Immigration and Judiciary Committee members and then move on to our broader Democratic Caucus members. And instead of recognizing myself first, I'm going to recognize Ms. Ross because I know she has to leave. 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much for holding this hearing. Thank you so much to our witnesses for your extremely powerful testimony. And I want to focus a lot of my questions on the use of law enforcement and the National Guard. I'm from North Carolina. We know how important the National Guard was to us. For Hurricane Helene, something that the National Guard is proud to help with, a national disaster. We want to make sure that people who volunteer to be part of our military and part of our public safety are utilized in the highest and best way. Earlier this month, a federal judge ruled that President Trump's deployment of the National Guard in Los Angeles for law enforcement and immigration enforcement was illegal. So they were there. It took a lawsuit to make this clear, but it hasn't stopped the president. Ms. Goldbeck, can you discuss the impact of deploying the National Guard to aid in conducting civil immigration enforcement? I know you spent a little time on this, but I want to give you a little bit more time.
Thank you so much for the question, Congresswoman. There's a law in this country that has existed for several hundred years, posse comitatus. It prevents the military from doing domestic law enforcement work. And this president seems intent on not just blasting through that law and all precedent, but to really change the way Americans see the military, to turn the military and the National Guard and active duty Marines or whoever he deploys next into a tool of domestic power and control. When we see National Guardsmen deployed in our streets for what is not a true emergency, when you have the chief of police of the Los Angeles Police Department, which, by the way, is not a notoriously woke organization, saying that we have the situation in hand, that you are escalating by bringing the National Guard here, by bringing active duty Marines who are not trained to do this type of mission. We know that the president's intent is escalation, not public safety. If he wanted to solve crime, if he wanted to crack down on criminals, he would ask local law enforcement what they needed. And when they say this is not what we need, this is in fact making the situation worse, it is making our residents feel unsafe, then we should listen. And Americans are listening. Ms. Gupta talked about the fact that that public opinion has really shifted on this issue because people don't feel safe when they see this. And I think it's really important that we remember that our founders drew this line for a reason. And when we erase that line, we look less like America and more like the regimes we fought against.
And just a final question for you, and you made reference to this, but in particular, we're about to have the anniversary of Hurricane Helene. How does deploying the National Guard in this way affect both our military readiness and our ability to deal with natural disasters and the traditional things that we count on our National Guard for?
Thank you, Congresswoman. I'm from California, and our National Guard play a huge role in wildfire response. They were very involved in the response to the Los Angeles fires. Across the country, they're involved in disaster response, and we're gearing up for hurricane season and other natural disasters that we can anticipate will occur. And we don't have a bottomless supply of National Guard. Folks think that, they're just there on standby. But for the last 20 years we've been at war, the National Guard have been operationally forward deployed. Most Guards members have served in theater at some point. And these folks have real missions to do, whether it's overseas or at home. So taking them out of their jobs, where many of them serve as local law enforcement or firefighters, sending them here to do what? To pick up trash? I spoke with a member who said, I looked online and they're calling us the National Gardeners. How does that impact morale? How does that impact readiness? And what is the cost to the taxpayer?
Well, thank you very much for your testimony, and thank you for your service. I yield back.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ross. I recognize myself now for questions. I think, Ms. Letnich and Ms. White, you saw, you had us all in tears up here. We're all parents, and I just want to thank you for speaking out for so many people that can't be in the room. And Ms. White, I just have been thinking about how you moved your whole family away and gave up your whole business and sold everything. And you talked about this traffic stop, and I guess I just wanted to know a little bit more about the traffic stop. Were there only local police there initially? Did it seem like you were stopped just because of the color of your husband's skin? What happened at that traffic stop? Because there are many things that are wrong with that traffic stop, but I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about that.
Well, when we originally pulled up to the stop, I thought it was just a regular DUI checkpoint. The officer had came up, the Tennessee Highway Patrol officer originally came up to the window and asked if we had anything, consumed any alcohol or anything. I told him, no, sir. He said, okay, you're free to go. He walked up to the car that was in front of us, to another Tennessee Highway Patrol officer, and pointed back at our car. That's when that officer returned to our car, looked directly in the vehicle into the window at Hilario, and said, I need you all to pull over to the side. I do believe it was racially profiling because they had no way of knowing anything about him other than the color of his skin. Once we got over to the side, that's whenever I noticed, I guess, what was ICE agents, but they was in unmarked clothing. So I didn't know they was ICE agents until we was there for about 5 minutes after they had separated us, pulled us out of the car, searched us, and took him away, and then they returned and said that he was being held by ICE. So that's how that went.
I mean, it brings me to a question for Ms. Gupta because, given what we heard from Ms. White, just thinking about the recent Supreme Court decision that essentially allows ICE to continue to use racial profiling in immigration enforcement actions, what do you think we're going to see now, given that court decision, in any future upcoming raids and immigration actions in other cities?
Yes. Thank you, Congresswoman. So it's right that the Supreme Court has given ICE a green light without a formal written opinion on its shadow docket to use the way a person looks, the language they speak, the kind of work they do or where they are as a method to profile. And so we can expect going forward that they will double down on indiscriminate tactics like following people en route to work sites where there are likely to be low-income workers, or target and surveil heavily Latino or Asian American communities like we're seeing in Pilsen in Chicago, or making arrests of Uber drivers like we've seen here in Washington, D.C., simply because they speak another language. You know, the Fourth Amendment still stands as a limit on ICE's actions, but this decision signals that the Supreme Court is unwilling to enforce strict limits when it comes to profiling of people in our streets in this indiscriminate, no priority agenda. And this is in many ways then green lighting an agenda that makes all Americans less safe.
You know, one of the things that I was thinking as I was listening to your testimony, Ms. Goldbeck, is that there are many tragedies in all of this, but one of the huge ones that you have highlighted is the way in which we are making our country less safe, the way in which we're giving less respect to our troops, and because we're asking them to do things that they really should not be doing. In some of ICE's indiscriminate enforcement actions, we've seen U.S. citizens and even veterans, and you mentioned this, caught up, arrested, and detained. Can you discuss how these attacks on veterans are affecting veterans across the country? You spoke a little bit on the kind of what it's doing to people when they're collecting garbage instead of helping with natural disasters, but can you say a little bit more about the attacks on veterans and how that's affecting others?
Yeah, I mean, I think about both veterans and folks who are actively serving right now, who are in a combat zone or a kinetic environment, and they are fearing that their loved ones could be picked up and deported at home. I mean, there are two stories that really stand out to me. One is in California, where ICE agents arrested Narciso Barranco, the father of 3 active duty U.S. Marines while he was out doing landscaping work. He had no criminal record. His sons have served this country honorably. They're still serving, yet their father was pinned to the ground and hauled off like a criminal. He spent nearly a month in detention before being released on bond. And so for those Marines and every veteran or service member who sees this story, the message is clear. Your service doesn't protect you or your family. And that betrayal cuts deep. There's also the story of Alma Bowman in Georgia. She's the daughter of a U.S. Navy veteran and has lived here for decades. She was born in the Philippines while her father was serving. She was detained at an ICE check-in despite strong evidence that she's a U.S. citizen by birth. She's now in a wheelchair, struggling with diabetic neuropathy, yet she's still held in detention. The daughter of a Navy veteran treated this way, facing deportation when she should be a protected citizen. So it shakes all veterans' faith in this system and that they will be protected.
Thank you so much. My time has expired. I would like to recognize member of the Immigration Subcommittee and the Judiciary Committee, Mr. Garcia from Illinois.
Thank you, Ranking Member Jayapal, and to each of the witnesses. You've truly shared what is going on across the country with immigrants, with lawful permanent residents, U.S. citizens, the military personnel that are being manipulated into horrible situations and being an extension of a terrible policy, and of course the impact on the economy, because immigrants power a lot of the U.S. economy. But at the same time, we're hearing about the Trump administration's cruel and lawless anti-immigrant agenda that's continuing to destroy families, communities, and fabric of across the nation. It's been 8 months since Donald Trump took office, and we should all be familiar at this point with his administration's violent assault on immigrants. They're conducting mass surveillance, kidnapping people off the streets, at workplaces, dumping them in brutal detention centers. You've testified to that, without access to basic necessities, trying to deport them to torture prisons in third countries. And now Republicans are spending over $100 billion in taxpayer dollars to fuel more violence against our fellow community members. As many of you know, I proudly represent a Latino majority district that includes working class communities across the Southwest Side in Chicago and surrounding suburban communities. Our diverse community has been specifically targeted by this administration. They've now ramped up with Operation Midway Blitz, which has led to the invasion of our district by masked thugs who are targeting hardworking residents without criminal records. And I thought a lot about using that term out of respect for good law enforcement personnel. But just last Tuesday, Secretary Noem joined in a military armored vehicle for a raid in the town of Elgin. They broke down someone's door in a pre-dawn raid with cameras in tow, of course, and ended up detaining 2 U.S. citizens who they released shortly after. But this lawlessness is also getting people killed, including in my district. Last Friday, I shot and killed an undocumented immigrant in Franklin Park who had just dropped off his kids at school. DHS claims that Silverio Villegas Gonzalez drove at officers and hit and dragged one before that officer shot him. The publicly available footage thus far contradicts much of their narrative, and now ICE is claiming they don't have body camera footage of the incident. This is an absolute disgrace. Violent thugs are targeting, shooting, and killing people, and they're not just even wearing body cameras. Ms. Gupta, thank you for being here today. Can you speak to the impunity that we're seeing with ICE officers and the lack of body cameras and how it only adds to that impunity?
Yes, thank you, Congressman, and also for that description of what's happening in real time in Chicago right now. I think All of these things that you're referencing, the use of face masks, plain clothes, refusal to wear cameras, and especially the refusal to answer questions, the lack of transparency, are all just symptoms of an agenda that is indiscriminate with absolutely no enforcement priorities. This is a politically motivated set of quotas, and that is the only thing driving everything we see on the ground. Face masks, no body cameras, they are in some ways the point. They drive theater and fear. The White House has left it up to ICE agents as to whether or not they want to wear masks, giving them an essential green light to do so despite the reaction it's eliciting on the ground. If we had a transparent, honest, targeted enforcement agenda, of course masks wouldn't be necessary, and it wouldn't be a problem to use body cameras. And of course, it's true, there are some officers that have faced threats from community members given the terrorizing tactics that are being used. But at the end of the day, no body cameras, face masks, plain clothes, that actually erodes the credibility of law enforcement itself. It's bad for law enforcement in cities like Chicago.
Thank you for that. Running out of time, just want to underscore one other case. On Sunday morning, just before the Mexican Independence Day in my neighborhood, the parade, 2 children were left crying in a vehicle in the town of Cicero. Ms. Letonich, just like you testified in your presentation, this is what's happening in communities and how families are being torn apart. Thank you. I yield back, Madam
Thank
Chair.
you so much, Mr. Garcia. I now would like to recognize another member of the Judiciary Committee, Ms. Ballant from Vermont.
Good morning. I want to start off by saying to Ms. White, you're showing incredible courage being here with us today. And I know it can't possibly be easy. And I know I speak for the entire dais up here. Our hearts are breaking for you and all of the spouses that are dealing, because we know you're not alone. But thank you for being here. It helps us to do our jobs better when we can tell your story. So look, I had remarks prepared, but I have to go back to something that you said, Ms. Letnich. You talked about the kids who are now feeling responsible because they said that they had an immigrant or an undocumented parent at home. And I just need to speak absolutely and completely from the heart here. My grandfather was killed in the Holocaust. His children were asked in school, do you have Jewish parents at home? My aunt lived with that guilt for her entire life. She died this past year. It haunted her till her dying day. And they took advantage of her and her innocence as a child, believing that the adults around her were trustworthy. This is what we are doing to our children. This is what is happening in our name. And we never thought that it could happen here, and it's happening here. And so I just want to go to the heart of it. Please, can you tell us more? This is trauma that is being perpetrated by our government. It is craven cruelty in our name. And I want to give those children voices today. And I want to have us hear that in its raw form so that we can make the case to the American people that this is what is happening in our name.
Thank you, Congresswoman. It is, it's horrible, and the children are going to a psychologist about this, a child psychologist about it right now, and they're having, 2 of them are having constant nightmares, I'm sure, about it. And you know, they're young and they're fragile, and they are you know, in their mind, every single day, they're wondering is this the day? Is this the day that we're going to be heard? Is my father going to be let go? And they go to school and they'll talk to people that we see and say, do you know what's happened to my family? They aren't criminals. They aren't criminals. We're not criminals. We're good people. So each of these things that they were abused in that facility and asked things they never should have been asked.
It is abuse. I'm so glad.
It's abuse.
It's abuse.
And
it's emotional, psychological torture.
It was. And they talk about it. You know, Abby will say, you know, I know that some of those people have children. Is this how they treat their children? How could they treat me like this? I don't understand. You know, so those are just honest responses besides the things that they know are wrong. In addition, there are things that it's like, this isn't human. This isn't a human way to behave to anyone, let alone children.
And I think you go right to the heart of it right there. Essentially what we are teaching our children right now, that we no longer in this country believe in the inherent human dignity of every single individual. And that's not just bad psychologically for those children and those families. It is horrible for the psychological health of this country when we are okay with saying that not everyone has basic human dignity. And I see I'm out of time. I thank you all so much for being here. I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ballant. I now would like to recognize Ms. Dexter from Oregon, who's been such an incredible champion for Ms. Letnich and for many people who are facing these immigration issues.
Thank you to the Ranking Member Jayapal for convening this vital shadow hearing. The Trump administration's immigration agenda is not just misguided. As we've heard, it's cruel, chaotic, and lawless. We are here today to bear witness and to stand up for the values that this country claims to hold dear: due process, dignity, and the sanctity of family, all of which have been absolutely disregarded. To our panelists, thank you so much for your bravery and for your voice today. And to Chelsea, what your family has gone through literally cannot be described except by your words. And so thank you so much for your courage being here today. I just cannot thank you enough. I'm grateful to have Mimi Letnich here, whose strength and courage and resilience through this has really brought to light for me and for our community the trauma that the Merlos family has gone through. And Jackie and Carlos Merlos are beloved members of our Portland community. It was a member of the community who's a friend who reached out and said, did you know that these members, we can't find them. We don't know where they are. Can you help us? And that literally is how we became connected. They're small business owners, neighbors, churchgoers, involved parents, and yet they were ripped from their children. We have heard so much, and I have so many questions, Mimi, but I wanted to also highlight something that is egregious in my mind as well, is the detention of Juana, who is here legally with a visitor visa. And since July 2nd, after a family reunion where she was able to see her two daughters and her grandchildren together, she has been detained in an ICE facility despite being a legal visitor and has been denied being able to go back to her home country. Can you please just describe this for us, Mimi?
There's no way to explain the abuse that is been given to Juana. She was brought in. She came in on a visitor's visa. She went through customs legally, and she and her husband came to visit. And she's now been in an ICE facility for 83 days. Her visa has not been revoked. She has not been charged with any crime. We have tried to get her out on bail, and they will not release her on bail because she's a flight risk to go back to Honduras, which is where they want her to go. We have moved her flight 3 times. Moved her flight to return to Honduras 3 times while we're waiting for her to go through her next hearing. She also, as Jackie told me a few days ago, is starting to be very unclear. Her words are, she's not completing sentences. Jackie said that she said they need some better food. They need some more support from a medical facility. And she was told that we already pay $200 a person for you guys to be here. This is what you get.
I want to follow up on that. I mean, it is absolutely absurd that we are detaining a woman who wants to go back to her country, who's here legally. We are putting her life in jeopardy. And the U.S. government, or actually not the U.S. government, GEO Group, has made an estimated $15,000 off of detaining her, roughly $187.50 a day, by keeping her here. Who does that benefit? It benefits a for-profit corporation that is detaining our people. I also want to just share with folks that when I was able to see Jackie and the children, what you said is exactly right. It was like a zoo. They did not know who I was. I walked in, tried to get her attention. She was kneeling with the 4 children praying. And she looked up and just asked not to be interrupted and kept praying. I cannot describe what that impression left on me. These 4 small children in probably a 10 by 10 windowed cell, soundproof glass, gray cement bench that they were kneeling on with thin mats on the floor and a toilet in the corner. It is absolutely insane that this is what we have done to this family. Thank you for sharing the children's perspective on this and the fact that we have traumatized them for an entire lifetime, and these are U.S. citizen children. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Dexter. Now recognize Representative Tlaib from Michigan.
Ooh, Maxine. Of course, you've been thanked a lot, but I want you to know many family members can't be here. You know the retaliation for anybody to speak up. I don't care if it's National Guard, anywhere in our military. So just know there's a lot of people behind you, and you're here giving them a voice when they're feeling paralyzed and just full of fear. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here, and just know there's all these people behind you, like literally just saying keep it up and talk. I got text messages from folks like, that happened to someone, and they're relating. Even someone just texted me that a rural postal worker was racially profiled recently. I mean, that's what our country's turning into. I still can't get out of the image of going to read to elementary school. This was years ago, and I was reading to 3rd graders. And I remember coming in, and you always kind of come in and get those little chairs, and you're sitting there waiting for them to come and get you to take you to class. And I just remember seeing this little girl. Her hair was so just long. I just kept thinking, God, that would be so hard in the mornings to untangle that hair. When she turned, she was crying. And I don't know, there's something. And I had to ask, is everything okay? Is somebody, bullying her? Like, what's going on? She had gone to her home, and her parents were gone. And the neighbors told her that, I don't like picked up. They were kidnapped. They were taken, again, many times I've seen it as an immigration attorney. No warrant, no real authorization. And so, Director Gupta, I want people to understand how broken and inhumane, as we continue to fight in courts, winning some, bringing at least some into attention. The new policy on expedited removal is destroying our due process. talk a little bit about that. I want the American people to understand they're moving them before we can even get to them as legal representatives. They're moving them so quickly, so fast, that we're not able to at least get before a judge to fight on their behalf.
Yes, thanks so much, Congresswoman. So you're absolutely right that this administration has taken multiple steps now to abrogate and deprive people of the most basic due process. And as a starting matter, we're talking about an immigration system where there's no right to an appointed lawyer, an immigration court system that is not independent. Immigration judges report to the same president as the prosecuting attorney. It is already a system that doles out punitive, destructive consequences like deportation and detention without high levels of due process. So we're already starting from a lower level of due process. And this administration is taking that to an all-time new low. And the reason that they're doing that, including using expedited removal, is because it is, again, back to their efforts of deporting as many people as possible, arresting people to meet their daily goals. Due process is a barrier for them to meet those goals, to meet those targets. Diplomatic barriers, due process,
and
processing.
Director Gupta, when I heard about the staging locations,
Yes.
I don't like that we call them this, because I think when people are listening right now, they don't know what that means. It's literally right before they put them on the plane. They're putting them on concrete flooring. No one knows they got moved. We have no idea. The database, the where you go locator or whatever the heck, you know what I'm talking about, Chelsea? That thing was always down. When I was looking for someone, I had a family 12 days. I could not find them because guess what? When Border Patrol they couldn't find any beds. They couldn't find any place to take them. For 12 days, they were at an office building on the floor with 3 kids. And when I found out about it and went there, they were like, sorry, but ICE needs it. And then I said, well, why couldn't I find our family members? Why couldn't I? Because they are our family members. Why couldn't I find them? Well, Border Patrol, and we got to fix this, Pramila. Border Patrol doesn't have access to that system, right, Director Gupta? So they are kidnapped and disappeared. We have no idea where the hell they are. And so I want to talk, it's so inhumane because there's such a shock and a fear, and you can't find them and you don't know how to get to them. And I just really hope people understand to take a deep dive into that. And Lynch, I want to tell you, in the 80s and 90s, it worked to talk about the economic impact. It did. And it's important. I get it. Of course, we use that because it was about the moral, human, family issue and community issue for us. But they don't care about that anymore. It is about the cruelty. And that's why we have to do a shadow hearing. Chair Jayapal has to do a shadow hearing because they don't want to talk about it on the official side of Congress. But we're going to continue to expose them. And, Pramila knows that I'm not going to wait 10 years, 11 years, and everybody would be against it. Oh, it was terrible we did that at that time. Well, guess what? It's going to be my kids racially profiled later. You know it. It's going to be our babies if we don't stop it now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Tlaib. Now let me recognize Mr. Garamendi from California.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and a big thank you for holding the hearing and for the witnesses. Your testimony is powerful. It's extremely important, and it's important that the general public, and particularly our colleagues here in Congress, hear your testimony. It's being recorded, and that's terrific. But your testimony and the issues and the people that you've talked about are not unique. In each of our districts, you've heard from my colleagues here, you're going to hear from me in a moment. A 73-year-old woman, been in the country since for 30 years, 13 of the last 13 years trying to obtain the proper legal documents, caught in a bureaucratic mess between India and the United States. She wants to go home. She wants to go home to the Punjab. She can't because she cannot get papers. The U.S. government won't help her. The Indian government is back and forth. She is now stuck in a facility picked up by ICE as she was conducting her semi-annual review at the ICE facility. They simply wait outside and they grab people who are doing the right thing, obeying the law. It is crazy. Harjit Kerr is just one of thousands and thousands of people across this country who are doing the very best they can to be good citizens in the United States, working hard. She's worked for 13 years in a restaurant in the Bay Area. That doesn't count. Doesn't count that her family is here. Doesn't count that she's done her very, very best to obey all of the laws. The stories are thousands, perhaps millions, before this is done. And so thank you so very much for the testimony. Thank you for being here and for this hearing. I've got 3 minutes, and I'd like for each of you in your area to take 15 seconds, 20 seconds, and say, what should we do as members of Congress in addition to holding these hearings? Let's start with the economic issues.
Thank you. I just want to quickly say how much I appreciate the other witnesses here, because you're talking about such an important issue in the human side, and I'm talking about data. But it is important to, there was an attempt in 2012, 2013 to have a bipartisan Immigration Reform Act. There was last year in 24, there was another attempt to do so. What we need is a sensible, common sense immigration reform that doesn't treat human beings like animals.
So you've seen that we have to do shadow hearings because our Republican colleagues refuse to do what had been done in the past, and that's legitimate hearings to get to the bottom of it. Ms. Goldbeck, with regard to the veterans.
Well, I just want to thank all of you, and especially Ranking Member Jayapal, for your leadership on this topic. And I would suggest that increasing pressure on your Democratic colleagues to lean into this issue. It is not a winning issue for Republicans. You can be the biggest border security hawk and still have a pit in your stomach when you see a masked, ununiformed, no badge person kidnapping your neighbors out of parking lots and your streets and cities. So please continue to put the pressure on your Democratic colleagues to lean in and really tell these stories.
Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. I echo leaning in on colleagues to focus on this issue. You are talking about people in your district who don't have permanent status here in the United States, who don't have citizenship. There are millions of undocumented people who have been waiting 30 years for Congress to give them pathways to citizenship and lawful status, and everything you all can do to move that conversation forward. We're seeing now the consequence of that failure as so many people with temporary and no status get swept up in this agenda.
Thank you. I think all of us are aware of legislation that has not been moving.
I think, in the support of what you're saying, we are beyond awareness. Everybody's looking for action. And I think also in the spirit of this being bipartisan, there are many, many people that have shown up at our home, people we don't know that have dropped off things for children, and they are voting on the other side. Nobody wants this. And we have to find a way to give more people a way to participate, to be active in the movement.
Thank you. Ms. White?
I believe that there needs to be better policies or pathways in place to keep families together. The way they're doing it right now just isn't working. There's got to be a better way or another way to keep families together other than waiting years to try to process paperwork.
Thank you. I would just remind all of us that we came very, very close last year to an immigration reform bill. Actually, the Senate had moved it, came to the House, and the Speaker said, no way will that be even taken up in the House, and it didn't. And we're left with the problem that we have today. For my constituent, she is in a world of hurt in a detention center that is known to be badly managed with bad health care issues. And so we'll do the best we can individually along the way. Thank you so much for the hearing. Yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garamendi. Now I'd like to recognize somebody who's been a champion on this issue for a long time, Ms. Chu from California.
Thank you so much, Congressmember Jayapal, for holding this shadow hearing. And then I want to thank all of the witnesses for coming out today to give your very, very important testimony at this particular time. And let me just say, when we talk about how Donald Trump's agents are snatching and disappearing people off our streets and into detention centers, I think of my constituent, Rami Othane. He is from Tunisia, resides in my district in Pasadena, and is married his wife in March. But in Donald Trump's America, he was actually obtaining his legal status as he married his wife, and it was in the process of obtaining his green card. But none of that mattered in this atmosphere. In July, Rami was simply driving to the grocery store when several masked ICE agents in unmarked cars surrounded him. Despite his urgent pleas about his valid visa application, Trump's ICE agents snatched him off the street and transported him to a temporary holding facility in downtown Los Angeles, which is basically a hellhole. And once he got there, even ICE officials were confused as to why he was being held when his application for a green card was valid. But the facts, the law, and justice are meaningless to this administration, despite his valid application, and despite the fact that Rami should have only been held in this facility for 12 hours. He was held for 13 days in brutal conditions. There was no bed. There was barely a place to even sleep. They had to take turns sleeping on a concrete floor without any blanket or anything. And it was freezing cold. And what's more, Rami is currently battling a brain tumor, which caused him to faint and be transported to a hospital where he was handcuffed to a bed until his release. He was kept in this facility for 13 days with barely any food, and he ended up 15 pounds lighter than when he entered. Finally, he was driven to a detention center in Arizona, but driven without air conditioning, so it was over 100 degrees. And there were 13 more days in the Arizona detention where he was finally released with an ankle monitor. We advocated for his release. Finally, he was released, but he is now traumatized forever. And you can hear the pain and trauma in his voice when you talk to him. So, Ms. Gupta, what does Rami's story tell you about who the Trump administration is truly targeting and how they will bend and break the law to do so?
Yeah, I mean, I think your story and all the ones we've heard today underscore the indiscriminate nature of this agenda, right? It doesn't matter whether someone has lawful status or not. It even doesn't matter whether they're a citizen. This is so indiscriminate, what they're doing, that all that really matters are daily arrest goals and the removal goals that they have overall for this agenda. That's the first. The second is that they are functioning at a very high level of impunity and absolutely no transparency here. It doesn't matter what internal standards they've ever had, what oversight members of Congress are supposed to have. They are locking people up in a growing immigration detention system with inhumane, horrific conditions and depriving people access to those facilities because that is par for course with the current agenda that we're seeing. So, you know, the story that you explain and that we've heard is clearly not unique. It's part of a pattern here. And, you know, the only way forward is to keep sharing these stories, to help people who are not exposed to what's happening understand that this has become endemic to this administration's mass deportation agenda.
Thank you.
We are waiting for two more members who are on the way who really want to be here, so I'm going to use the privilege of the chair to ask a couple more questions. And I'm going to go to you, Professor Lynch, because I think that I remember all of the times when we've talked about the economy and the effects on the economy. I've got to believe then that if the morality isn't reaching people, at some point we are going to see the economy start to collapse, and your research shows some of that. You know, after mass deportations, you might expect that there are thousands of additional jobs for U.S. workers, but your research doesn't really show that that happens. Can you just explain why mass deportations cause such economic harm, such job loss for U.S. workers?
Yes. So there are several reasons, one of which I think is widely understood by the American people, but the others not so well understood. The one that's well understood is people often say, oh, well, unauthorized immigrants take jobs that Americans aren't willing to do, so if you remove them, the Americans aren't going to go. Someone who lost their job in a factory in Maine is not going to go to the Central Valley of California to pick fruits and vegetables. People get that point. But there are several other, arguably even more important reasons why this is happening. One is a simple issue that we refer to as the demand side effect, which is not complicated at all. But there are about 8 million unauthorized workers in the United States. They earn hundreds of billions of dollars every year. They spend that money on food, clothing, stores, rent, et cetera, et cetera. And if you take those people out, those hundreds of billions, they're going to lose their jobs, lose their income, and that hundreds of billions of dollars of spending goes away, which means American businesses are going to sell hundreds of billions of dollars less, which means they're going to cut back on production, which means they're going to cut back on their workforces, which mean American workers are also going to lose their jobs. There's a second, probably even more important issue, and that is that people seem to think that unauthorized immigrants are simply close substitutes for American workers. That is, that these unauthorized immigrants, they have low skills, low education, and there are Americans who similarly have low education, low skills. And if you rip out of the economy 8 million unauthorized workers, that's going to create jobs for 8 million Americans. But that's not the way the work goes. People have been studying this now for the last 20 plus years and have found that, in fact, in most cases, unauthorized immigrants are not substitutes, but they're what we call complementary workers. They work in conjunction with other workers, not in competition with them. And what happens is if you strip out, for example, in a restaurant, the 3 or 4 workers in the back who are chopping the vegetables, cleaning the bathrooms, etc., and you can't replace them, then the American worker who may be overseeing the restaurant, who may be a waiter or waitress, they lose their jobs as well. All of you can understand that. All of you have staff. You have excellent staff. If we suddenly take away 25% of your staff, you're not going to be as productive as you are now. You're going to not do as well. So the problem is that we find that when you take out these hundreds of thousands of undocumented workers, not only do they lose their jobs, authorized immigrants often lose their jobs, and American citizens lose their jobs, usually in roughly equal numbers.
Thank you so much. We've now been joined by Representative Delia Ramirez, so let me recognize you for your 5 minutes.
Thank you, Subcommittee Ranking Member Jayapal. I want to thank all of the witnesses who joined us today. And I want you to know that we stand in solidarity with all of those whose loved ones have been detained or disappeared over these last 9 months. On Friday, our communities in Franklin Park, Illinois, a community represented by Congressman Chuy Garcia and I, witnessed inevitable violence resulting in this president's administration's unconstitutional, unlawful, unaccountable actions. Near a school, after dropping off his child, ICE agents under the jurisdiction of the Department of Homeland Security shot Silverio Villegas Gonzalez. He died a few hours after. Silverio's death is not an isolated incident. It is a consequence of Trump's anti-immigrant agenda. ICE's pattern of racial profiling and their unlawful policing in our communities has real death consequences. The militarized tactics used by DHS and the deployment of ICE agents with no transparency, no oversight, undermine the rule of law, and we know this. It creates fear and chaos in our communities. People in Chicago right now are wondering, can I drop off my child to school today? Will I be shot by ICE in front of my child? No one should have to ask that question and make decisions based on, will my child see me get killed by ICE today? Men in masks conducting these jump-off traffic stops without badges, without body cameras, making arrests without valid warrants are tactics that put our community in harm's way. And DHS is not above the law. Let me say that again. DHS, Department of Homeland Security, is not above the law. A traffic violation should never amount to a death sentence. And we have demanded a full and thorough investigation of what happened that day. They should immediately release body camera footage, if they have it, and warrants and relevant information on this case, because what ICE put out in their statement is not consistent with all of the footage we have seen of that day. So I have a couple questions in the 2 minutes that I have left. This question is for Ms. Gupta. We have seen an increased use of traffic stops, particularly these jump-out traffic stops in Chicago that put our communities at increased risk of incidents like what happened to Silverio. What authority does ICE have to conduct traffic stops? And what do families need to know if they're pulled over by ICE?
Yes, thank you, Congresswoman. So, unfortunately, related to the Supreme Court decision we saw this week, ICE has been given a green light to target people based on where they might be going, based on what they look like, and they are in our streets now trying to stop people. What we've seen around the country with traffic stops is that in some instances, these are ICE officers making stops. In other instances, it is ICE working with state or local police who make the traffic stop and then tag in ICE to come in and do the federal side of the enforcement. Now, in jurisdictions where there are 287G agreements, where there are formal collaboration between state and local police and DHS, local police themselves are authorized to make immigration arrests, to interrogate people during the course of routine traffic work. And in those instances, we are seeing many folks get arrested for immigration violations simply when they're pulled over for alleged speeding.
So, following up on that, I want to ask a question to Mr. Lynch. We know that, you were talking a little bit about workforce and complementary workforce instead of competition, which we know intentionally designed to call it competition so that there's fear and hate of our immigrant neighbors. So, we know that undocumented immigrants contribute more than $100 billion in taxes each year. I'll say it again for those in the back. $100 billion in taxes each year. But the chilling effect of the kind of enforcement activities that the Trump administration is using is harder to understand. So what do we know about the chaos and fear of mass disappearance? What do we know it will do to impact the economy? And will people file taxes if the IRS is now using that as a way to be able to detain and deport people?
So you're absolutely right. We know that undocumented immigrants now are paying roughly $100 billion a year in taxes, about two-thirds of that to the federal government. They pay into Social Security, into Medicare, and that improves the finances of the system because they're not eligible to receive those benefits. So it's a huge improvement to our finances there, which helps all American citizens. And what's happening now with these raids, we're seeing not only that, for example, in agriculture, not only are they undocumented immigrants afraid, but obviously because of the things that have been described here, many authorized immigrants are as well, and people are not showing up for work. People are making decisions not to appear. And as an example, I have friends who are 30-year immigrants to the United States, applied for citizenship, got married, have 2 kids, and they simply now have moved outside of the country because they don't want their American-born children to suffer the indignity of being stopped and arrested, possibly simply because of the color of their skin and the fact that they speak Spanish. So it is a damaging effect very broadly, not just among unauthorized immigrants, among authorized immigrants as well, and of course it affects everybody else in the economy and
Thank you, Mr.
government.
Lynch. My time is up. Thank you, Ranking Member.
Thank you so much, Representative Ramirez. And now I would like to recognize Representative Vargas from California for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Ranking Member, and I apologize that I was tardy. We have a whole bunch of things going on today, but this is very, very important. I wanted to be here, so I want to thank all of you. The Trump administration and Trump are undertaking an out-of-control anti-immigrant agenda that is creating fear and chaos, as you all know. Instead of targeting violent criminals, this administration is using taxpayer dollars to tear families apart and deport hardworking members of our community. I live in San Diego. I represent the border area of San Diego. So, of course, there are a lot of immigrants there, and people are terrified. People are terrified, and as we've heard, because of what the Supreme Court has done now, allowing for racial profiling, people are very scared and also, frankly, humiliated. A lot of people are telling me they're afraid that they're going to be pulled over and their kids are going to think, well, Dad, Mom, why are we being pulled over? Why are we less? And those are things that really stay with people. I speak Spanish. I actually drive an old truck myself. And when I was younger, I was fixing up the house that we live in. I was trying to teach my daughter Spanish. I certainly could have been picked up. Mi nombre es Juan, Juan Vargas. So how do they get away with this? I mean, the court now has said in the shadow docket, but what will the court do when it comes to them in full? Will they change their mind? Who's the attorney? Yes.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. I mean, so, this decision from the Supreme Court, it's not a final decision.
Right.
It is just specific to roving patrols in Los Angeles, but it does signal where the Supreme Court is headed when it comes to racial profiling and profiling on other factors for immigration enforcement. And really what they're saying is that, yes, ICE can look at how somebody looks or the language they speak or where they work or where they're headed when they decide who they're targeting and which communities they're focusing on for surveillance and arrests. The Fourth Amendment does still apply. That is an important set of rights for immigrants in our communities, but we are concerned, given what we've seen from the Supreme Court, that if this question goes more squarely before it, that they will weigh in favor of this kind of profiling.
Well, as a Latino, I don't feel like that Fourth Amendment protects me too much these days, and it doesn't seem like it protects people that look like me that speak Spanish. I mean, there seems to be a real erosion of that amendment.
I think that's correct. It absolutely is eroding a set of rights around not being targeted based on how somebody looks. But it's still the case that, ICE cannot enter into people's homes or businesses without judicial warrants. There are still legal barriers that they have to abide by. And when they don't, it's our job to file lawsuits and hold them to it.
Since you did bring up the warrants, in San Diego, 8 blocks from my house, there was a raid, a pretty celebrated raid of a restaurant. And a whole bunch of people were detained, and 4 people were ultimately detained and removed. It was interesting because then I asked to pull the warrant, and I wanted to see the warrant and the affidavit to understand why everyone was detained. And in Section 62, the warrant said that you could detain all of the employees to find out which ones were not here officially. All of the employees, and of course we had a press conference in front of the court and denounced them, saying, where's your probable cause for an employee there you have no information on? How can you detain them? And they actually changed their mind, and they're not doing it now. So they're not signing these warrants. I mean, I think it's very important to take a look at the actual warrants, because there's no right to go into a restaurant, which this was, and detain all the employees. There's no probable cause on most of the employees there.
Yes, and certainly if this is an administrative warrant, which is a warrant issued by DHS, by the agency, then they don't have a lawful right to enter in the way that you're describing. If it is a judicial warrant and a judge has signed off on probable cause, that is different. But
it was a magistrate. It was a magistrate that signed off on it, but it turns out that she hadn't actually looked at Section 62, which she, of course, should have, because, again, the court now is not doing that. In fact, ICE is complaining about that because they had no right to do that.
Right, which underscores how important it is that in our communities we are asking to look at these warrants, to look at the justifications, to have press conferences, because this indiscriminate agenda means we're going to see more warrants like that.
My time's about up. I really appreciate all you're doing, and I really apologize, too, of what has happened, to your families. We have those families in San Diego that are suffering desperately, like yours, too, and we're trying everything we can to prevent this. It's a real injustice. It's immorality. It's cruel. It's sinful. It's all the things that you don't want to see in a society. It's horrible. And but I thank you for your courage and your willingness to stand up. There's always a few that do, and thank you so much for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Vargas. We are at time, and thank you for your generosity in staying a little bit. I want to just really express my tremendous gratitude to all of you for coming here. I think that when you look at what is happening today, you can look at it on any level. You can look at it on the moral level, what is being done to our families, what you both described, what we heard up here from numerous members of Congress who are seeing it in our districts. I have my own stories of my constituents. And you think about, I think it was you, Ms. Letnich, who said, don't you have children yourselves? How can this be happening, right? And I say this all the time. If you are a mom or a dad, imagine going through what you both have described, what you're going through right now, Ms. White. And you can look at it just from a moral perspective and say it is all horrific. It is horrific. You can look at it from an economic perspective and in the same way see the destruction of our country that is going to come about if we continue with these outrageous harsh enforcement policies and no reforms to the immigration system. I've been working on this issue for 20 years. 20 years. And the fact is, it is apparently in somebody's political interest to keep it broken so that they can keep blaming immigrants. So you can look at it from an economic perspective. You can look at it from a legal perspective. And I think about what you said, Ms. Gupta, about due process. The reason that they are not meeting the due process standards is because they can't. They can't. In all of these cases, when you look at what's happening and the erosion of due process rights and the ways in which they're going around, even shipping people to other countries, which we had a hearing on, a shadow hearing on, but shipping people to other countries in defiance of court orders, and then when they bring them back, suddenly the charges are totally different because they can't prove what it was that they originally said that they were getting rid of people for. So just in the legal sense, what's happening to our constitutional rights. And I just want to be really clear. If you can do this to an undocumented immigrant, to an immigrant with a visa status, you can do it to a U.S. citizen. And I think this is why I've been so intent on doing these hearings, because I do think that Americans across the country, on both sides of the aisle, to your point, actually know that this is wrong, but the people that are here in this body, that doesn't reflect what the American people think. And then you can look at it from a national security perspective, from a safety perspective. And I really want to thank you for bringing the voice of our troops, our National Guard, our veterans into the room, because we want to continue to respect the people that keep us safe. And we are not respecting them when we put them into this role. We had Kash Patel in front of us yesterday, a very tense hearing. One of the things that is true about the FBI is 20% of the FBI agents are being reassigned to immigration. What does that mean for our national security? So really at every level, you are helping to lift these stories up, and I get that awareness is not enough. I really do. Believe me, it's hard for me to even put into words. I'm an immigrant myself. There's only less than 24 of us naturalized citizens that serve in Congress today. And the idea that other people would not have the opportunities that we have had and that have made America great, not again, but made America great, is just horrifying. So I'm really grateful to you all for being here. And I want you to know that your testimony here today, and it'll be live streamed. I know we have a lot of folks here who are covering this. We will continue to put it out, and we will do everything we can to help the families that are directly affected and to continue to fight like hell for the country that we know we can be. Thank you all so much. The hearing is adjourned.